this is not about rage. This is about leverage. Ageism convinces you that your expertise is outdated, that your contribution is merely symbolic, that your voice belongs in the back row, and that your continued presence is an administrative inconvenience rather than a cornerstone of institutional memory. This systemic devaluation is often masked by patronizing language, comments about comfort, flexibility, or the necessity of new blood. We are relentlessly taught, through cultural osmosis and professional pressure, to fight these insidious insults with pure emotional volume, with loud, exhausting indignation, or by reciting exhaustive, self-aggrandizing lists of past accomplishments that, in the moment of crisis, are easily dismissed as historical artifacts. But the effective fight against structural ageism rarely needs a shout. Shouting only confirms the caricature of the emotional, unstable elder. Instead, the fight demands precision. It needs a document, specifically the governing document that establishes order. It needs a timestamp, marking the exact moment a policy was violated. Critically, it needs a single, irrefutable sentence, quoted precisely from the governing rulebook, delivered with unshakable calm. The goal is not to prove your feelings were hurt, but to prove the rules were broken. The real lasting victory happens not when the aggressor is emotionally shamed, but when the person dismissing you, the new director, the corporate HR representative, or the manipulative family member, realizes they are not battling a subjective opinion, an emotional reaction, or a vague feeling of entitlement. They realize, in chilling clarity, they are battling the explicit, written policy they themselves swore, implicitly or explicitly, to uphold. This shift from personal dispute to policy infraction weaponizes institutional integrity against institutional bias. 3 calm steps centered on irrefutable evidence lead to one loud, undeniable result: accountability. Dartiris, the day the room went silent. The case of Elias have observed this specific script play out in hundreds of polished boardrooms, across countless worn kitchen tables where family fortunes are decided, and under the sterile, unforgiving lighting of hospital waiting areas where critical medical decisions are made. The fundamental dynamic remains the same. The power shifts, subtly at first, through microaggressions, then aggressively, through policy breaches. The person with decades of accrued wisdom, institutional knowledge, and foundational authority is deliberately and systematically reduced to a liability, a burdensome vestige of the past that must be politely or impolitely managed out of the way. Take the definitive example of Elias. 30 years ago, Elias co-founded the non-profit organization that grew to run his city's largest, most critically acclaimed community arts center. He wasn't just a figurehead. He was the organizational architect. He knew the mission statement better than anyone because he wrote the first draft on a cocktail napkin. He maintained personal relationships with every major donor, understanding their philanthropic nuances. He knew the city council members by first name, often negotiating funding late into the evening. His expertise was comprehensive, deep, and irreplaceable. But last year, a new executive director arrived, a woman in her late 30s named Clara. Clara, armed with a recent MBA and a mandate for disruptive innovation, decided swiftly that Elias was, at best, decorative, a historical artifact to be displayed, and certainly not directive. Her initial strategy wasn't outright confrontation, which would risk backlash from the city. Instead, she began minimizing his established role in highly public, corrosive ways. At fundraising galas, Elias was introduced not as the chairman of our endowment committee, a position carrying immense financial weight and regulatory authority, but as our valued founder, here in spirit and historical context. His physical attendance was acknowledged, but his current authority was systematically erased by the introduction itself. The culmination of this systematic degradation, the ultimate strategic insult, occurred during the critical quarterly strategy meeting. This session was immensely high stakes, held specifically to approve the upcoming fiscal year's budget and, crucially, to secure the renewal of major city funding tied to compliance checks. The meeting was held in the organization's grand event hall, characterized by its high ceilings, polished dark wood, and a daunting array of seating. The main table was meticulously arranged in a wide U-shape, reserved exclusively for current, officially active leadership with voting privileges. For 3 decades, Elias had commanded the corner position on this table, always equipped with a favorite fountain pen and, critically, his leather-bound, dog-eared copy of the organization's policy manual and bylaws, always open to the relevant section. This time, however, when Elias walked into the hall, his customary executive-level chair, heavy oak, deeply cushioned, was conspicuously absent from the U-shaped table. A young administrative assistant, visibly nervous and diligently avoiding eye contact, intercepted Elias near the entrance. She directed him with a strained smile toward a distant row of cheap, uncomfortable folding chairs situated 15 feet back from the main table. The overflow seating intended strictly for observers, junior staff, and media interns. "Clara thought you'd be much more comfortable back here, Elias," the assistant mumbled, her eyes fixed firmly on the highly polished floor, incapable of sustaining the lie. Elias felt the immediate, familiar, and intensely hot rush of indignation surge through him. This was not merely an administrative oversight. It was a deliberate, calculated act of public expulsion designed to silence his input and diminish his stature before the city liaison. The common, predictable, and self-defeating mistake in this scenario is immediate, reactive confrontation. It involves demanding the chair back, arguing loudly about past history, citing the years of service, or storming out in a display of dramatic offense. That explosive reaction instantly validates the ageist narrative Clara was subtly constructing. He's too emotional. He's difficult to manage. He cannot handle necessary change or procedural fluidity. The rage confirms the bias. Elias paused, mastering the internal surge. He adjusted his tie with agonizing slowness, centered his posture, deliberately slowed his breathing, and, with the quiet dignity of a person utterly secure in his authority, took the assigned folding chair. He nodded once, calmly acknowledging the assistant, who fled the room immediately. Silence is evidence. When you're engaged in the fight against ageism, your deliberate, non-reactive calm is your single greatest operational asset. Your silence, your refusal to escalate the emotional temperature, documents the injury in its pure, unadulterated form without generating the secondary, distracting noise, the disruptive behavior, or temper tantrum, that can be so easily weaponized against you later in the formal review process. Clara launched the meeting with aggressive efficiency. Throughout the discussion, she talked over Elias whenever he attempted to contribute, speaking louder and faster, acting as if the high-tech microphone at the head table was the only operational sound input in the entire room. She consistently introduced buzzwords like lean operations and future-proofing. Then she aggressively pushed for a new, highly leveraged and risky financial strategy involving a significant restructuring of the investment portfolio. Elias knew instantly, based on 3 decades of organizational history, market volatility cycles, and most importantly, the foundational charter and endowment rules, that this strategy was a clear, severe violation of their fiduciary duty to the core endowment, the very engine of the center's longevity. Elias, with all due respect, we deeply appreciate your historical context and insight. Clara interrupted, flashing a condescending, practiced smile directly toward the city council liaison, ensuring her performance was noted. But we are pivoting dynamically to the future now. We need radical agility and forward momentum, not the paralyzing constraints of nostalgia. Elias realized that the issue was no longer centered on his personal dignity or his perceived status. At stake was the financial stability and the very future existence of the organization he had dedicated his life to building. He did not raise his voice in indignation. He did not pound the flimsy folding table in fury. He simply opened his thin, worn, leather-bound policy manual, flipping with immediate, practiced accuracy to the specific, critical page he had dog-eared, with a small adhesive tab the night before, anticipating this exact structural overreach. The sentence that stops the table. Weaponizing documentation. This is the pivotal shift in strategy, replacing emotional panic with irrefutable proof, thereby accruing maximum strategic power. Elias had cultivated a crucial, quiet ally on the main board, Sarah, a new member who possessed a detailed contemporary understanding of governance rules and was deeply skeptical of Clara's unilateral style. Before the meeting commenced, Elias had texted Sarah 3 cryptic, instruction-based words: watch and record. Sarah sat strategically 3 seats away from Clara, her smartphone resting discreetly but deliberately on the table surface, its camera aimed directly toward the center of the U-shape, ready to document the proceedings and the reactions of the leadership. When Clara, attempting to push the reckless funding resolution through without meaningful debate, put the proposal to a quick, seemingly decisive vote among the inner circle, Elias stood up. He moved slowly, deliberately, and with the quiet, devastating competence of someone who is absolutely certain of the authority he holds in his hand. The room, fixated on Clara's anticipated victory and the mechanics of the vote count, barely registered his solitary movement from the back row. "Clara," Elias said, his voice measured, low and perfectly steady, amplified only slightly by the sudden, expectant hush near his position. "Before the vote is formally tallied, I need to formally invoke Article 7, Section 3, Subsection B of the governing bylaws." He didn't launch into an accusation of bad faith. He didn't emotionally reference the missing chair or the public insult. He simply, neutrally, cited the rule's location. Clara, still riding the high of perceived victory, smiled dismissively, annoyed by the interruption but not yet sensing the danger. "Elias, please hold your comments until the open forum section allocated at the end. We are actively voting now." This was the absolute moment of truth. He had to show his hand, to transform the perceived personal slight into a verifiable institutional crisis. The most effective tool of organizational justice does not shout. It merely cites the chapter and verse of the law. Elias continued, slightly louder this time, bypassing Clara's invalidated authority entirely, addressing his remarks with laser focus directly to the city liaison, the neutral, regulatory representative whose job depended on the organization's compliance. Article 7.3b, Elias stated clearly, reading verbatim from his manual. It specifically stipulates that any financial resolution concerning the core endowment funds that exceeds 25% of the total annual operating budget requires mandatory, written, and antecedent approval from the official chair of the endowment committee. He paused, allowing the weighty silence to expand, demanding that the officials absorb the full regulatory implication of his precise wording. Clara responded instantly with a strained, slightly manicured laugh, a manufactured sound intended to diffuse the tension. "Elias, that's administrative history. You haven't been the official chair for many months. We formally transitioned that role to the new chief financial officer as part of the restructuring." Elias reached into his inner suit pocket with the same deliberate, practiced slowness. He pulled out a crisp, heavy white linen envelope, sealed and official, and placed it flat onto the corner of the main U-shaped table. The movement was slow, highly visible, and utterly final. He nudged the envelope slightly toward the seated city liaison. "I signed this organization's founding documents 30 years ago," Elias said, his eyes locking directly onto Clara's frantic ones. "I wrote Article 7, Section 3, Subsection B." He let the fundamental truth sink in, an unwritten law of governance. Policy written correctly beats ego and temporary power every time. The bylaws, Elias continued, his voice taking on the sonorous quality of historical fact, also stipulate, in Article 6, Section 1, that the endowment chair position automatically and perpetually defaults to the largest living founder, unless the said founder formally resigns the role in writing, and that resignation is subsequently ratified by a 2/3 majority of the sitting executive committee. He tapped the sealed envelope once, sharply. The contents of this envelope, which I encourage the city liaison to verify, are my signed annual compliance certification, sent to the city auditor's office last week. I am, and have been continuously, since the organization's founding and subsequent ratification of these bylaws, the only official, legally vested chair of the endowment committee, and I have never, formally or informally, submitted a letter of resignation, nor has one been ratified. The room descended into a complete, unnerving silence, a vacuum where authority had just violently shifted. The only audible sound was the low, steady hum of the air conditioning system cycling in the vast hall. The city liaison, fully recognizing the severe compliance exposure, immediately reached across the table for the white envelope, the proof that permanently ends the excuse. Elias's previously hidden authority, deliberately obscured by Clara, but meticulously documented within the organizational structure, was now undeniably visible and legally enforceable. He wasn't merely a nostalgic founder. He held a mandatory, policy-based gatekeeping function that Clara had not just ignored, but actively tried to circumvent in a manner that bordered on fiduciary malfeasance. He used his next sentence not to gloat, but to formally seal the structural consequence, ensuring the crisis could not be quietly managed away. Under the explicit and non-negotiable authority granted to me by Article 7.3 AB, Elias announced, his voice now carrying an undeniable governing weight that superseded the hall microphone and Clara's strained authority. I formally request that this unauthorized financial resolution be immediately and perpetually suspended. Furthermore, to ensure systemic compliance, I formally request that the governing board provide me with a full, unredacted copy of the official policy manual and the minutes from the last 4 executive sessions, as is required by my official position, within 24 hours. Clara tried frantically to object, her voice high-pitched and bordering on panic, but the city liaison, already pulling out his government-issued phone to contact his compliance officer and legal counsel, firmly raised a hand to silence her outburst. Elias had fundamentally changed the outcome of the power struggle, not by personally attacking Clara's competence, but by holding her rigorously accountable to the exact rules and regulations she claimed to manage, but had willfully disregarded. The immediate consequence was unambiguous. The vote was instantly cancelled by the city liaison. The risky new financial strategy was suspended indefinitely pending a full external governance review. Clara was forced to publicly issue a carefully worded, highly humiliating admission of error, citing a regrettable misunderstanding of the recent governance transition and bylaw authority. The real structural consequence arrived exactly 24 hours later. Clara was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a comprehensive, multi-week review of her actions and governance compliance failures. The board, facing potential financial penalties and a public relations disaster, issued a formal, contrite written apology to Elias, explicitly acknowledging his ongoing legal authority as endowment chair and immediately moving his policy input and physical position back to the absolute center of the strategy table. Bigger policy assets lead to bigger, undeniable dignity. Dignity, Justice Prep, the 10-minute centering ritual. Justice is rarely served in a sudden, emotional burst of outrage. That serves only the perpetrator who seeks to invalidate your reaction. true justice is delivered via meticulous preparation, verifiable documentation, and unshakable, centered personal strength. If you are currently facing systemic marginalization, regardless of the venue, whether it's a family member attempting to maliciously rewrite a vulnerable elder's will, an unscrupulous employer cutting your hours without cause and violating policy, or a neglectful landlord ignoring your tenancy rights, you must make a conscious, immediate shift from emotional reaction to strategic, documented response. We term this essential process the 10-minute justice prep. This powerful, ritualized preparation is specifically designed to provide you with 3 critical resources before confrontation: intellectual clarity, immediate physical centering, preventing the visible shaking or elevated pitch of panic, and irrefutable legal or administrative leverage. Step 1. The anchor breath and physical centering. 3 minutes. Find a private, quiet space, even if it's a bathroom stall or a parked car. Sit or stand with your weight distributed evenly, your feet firmly grounded beneath you. Roll your shoulders back and down, releasing muscular tension. Close your eyes. Commit to breathing deeply and deliberately for 3 full minutes, using a specific rhythm. Inhale slowly through your nose, expanding your diaphragm fully, counting silently to 5. Exhale slowly through your mouth, letting the breath hiss out, counting silently to 6. Repeat this ratio relentlessly. This exercise is not passive meditation. It is active physiological grounding. It demonstrably lowers your heart rate, decreases cortisol and adrenaline levels, and prevents your voice from cracking, shaking, or rising to a defensive emotional pitch when the moment of strategic confrontation finally arrives. Benefit: safety, clarity, and authority. When your body feels physically centered and calm, you instinctively speak lower, slower, and with an undeniable, resonant authority that commands attention and belief. Step 2. The evidence file and the phrase. 3 minutes. You need 2 primary instantly accessible tools ready in hand: the document reference and the neutral phrase. 1. The document reference. You must know the specific rule number, whether it is the HOA bylaw number, the company HR policy section on non-discrimination or reporting, the specific federal law regarding elder financial rights and power of attorney, or the official name on the deed or contract. You must write it down. Do not simply know the vague principle. Know the article, the section, the subsection, and the paragraph. This precise reference is the irrefutable truth that cannot be disputed by subjective argument. 2. The neutral phrase. You must craft and memorize a statement that immediately and decisively removes emotion from the interaction and demands the invocation of external, neutral authority. This phrase must be practiced until it sounds robotic and non-threatening, but firm. Strategic examples. I need the official policy number regarding this specific decision. For my records, I am requesting the immediate presence of the person in charge and a certified copy of the governing bylaws. Please confirm that this action is strictly consistent with the contractual terms signed and dated on exact date. I am formally documenting this interaction for compliance purposes, citing specific rule number regarding due process. Keep this policy number and the neutral phrase visible and accessible on a dedicated note card, taped discreetly to the back of your phone, or saved as the only text in a frequently used note-taking app. Step 3. The ally and the technological record. 4 minutes. Your cell phone is your most versatile and powerful tool for modern justice. If your local jurisdiction allows one-party consent recording, where only you need to know the conversation is being recorded, set a physical or digital shortcut to begin recording video or audio quickly, without fumbling. Even if you cannot legally record the verbal exchange itself, you must use the phone to immediately document the aftermath or the evidence. Take a time-stamped photograph of the intentionally misplaced chair, the blocked doorway, or the damaged property. Send a time-stamped text message detailing the exact nature of the exclusion or the offensive comment to a trusted recipient immediately after the interaction. Most crucially, you must choose your ally. This person, Sarah in Elias's case, is your designated witness, your structural backup. They do not have to intervene, argue, or speak up during the confrontation. Their single mission is to be ready to press record, if legal, or to be ready to confirm, under oath if necessary, the time, the location, and the precise nature of the perpetrator's actions and words. Allies, utilized strategically, change the outcome of the conflict. They shift the confrontation from a weak, subjective, your word against theirs situation to an unassailable, your objective truth supported by contemporary evidence. Respect your limits and secure the win. Ageism frequently targets those who are perceived as physically vulnerable, socially isolated, or financially dependent. Remember that achieving justice is often a long, drawn-out game of attrition, and your physical and psychological safety is always paramount. If any interaction involving policy enforcement or financial dispute escalates rapidly toward physical threat, intimidation, or immediate, irreversible financial danger, e.g., locking you out of a property, threatening physical harm, your priority must be immediate, non-confrontational removal from the situation. Documentation and formal escalation via recognized official channels such as Adult Protective Services, local law enforcement, or immediate legal counsel is always strategically superior to physical or high-stakes emotional confrontation. Laws concerning recording conversations, the specific scope of financial power of attorney, and tenancy regulations vary widely across geographies. Always adapt your preparation and strategy based on the strictest local regulations. Your ultimate goal must always be to move the precise documentation through formal, authoritative channels that legally lead to one of three outcomes: compelling the perpetrator to apologize and correct the policy breach, formal sanctions, and termination for the aggressor, or comprehensive fixing of the flawed system that enabled the bias. The bias that cost the house. The toxic core of ageism is the deeply rooted, unchallenged assumption of incompetence. It is the insidious belief that because you have accumulated years, you are automatically losing your memory, losing your competitive edge, losing your capacity for sound judgment, and therefore losing your fundamental right to control your own life, assets, and legacy. Elias proved the devastating opposite. He strategically used his superior organizational knowledge, the complex, foundational knowledge that only comes from decades of investment, the experience of writing the rules oneself, and the necessity of managing institutional complexity, to instantly and permanently stop the abuse of power. The moment the officially recorded deed speaks, the signed contract is placed flat on the negotiation table, or the specific verbatim policy number is cited with calm confidence. The underlying, subjective bias costs the perpetrator their ability to make any further excuses. Their performance is exposed as a non-compliant breach. It is absolutely possible to expose ageism, incompetence, and manipulation with unshakable dignity. It requires profound, calm courage, steady, proactive documentation, and a deep, pragmatic understanding that the verifiable paper trail, the governing mechanism, is stronger than the loudest, most indignant, or most desperate voice. We move from justifiable indignation to powerful strategic hope by internalizing the truth that accountability is not a subjective feeling that must be demanded. It is an objective, policy-driven mechanism that must be cited and activated. Today, start your justice prep ritual. Choose one action right now to begin actively shifting the power dynamic in your current challenge. 1. Locate and save the exact policy number, governing bylaw article, or critical contractual clause most relevant to your current vulnerability or challenge. 2. Set a quick access, 2-tap recording shortcut on your smartphone, only if legally permissible in your location. 3. Practice one calm, neutral phrase, aloud, demanding external authority. I am requesting the immediate presence of the person in charge and a copy of the policy. Choose your action. Execute your 10-minute ritual. And remember this truth: your quiet, documented competence is your single greatest leverage.